We have Rachel May back. I am so excited to talk with you today, Rachel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure and honor. This is so exciting.
Well, we're doing it a little bit different this time. You've got a lot of research for us and visuals, and we're going to be talking about how to move from waiting and seeing to watching and supporting and the SLP's role in early communication monitoring. Let's take a look. So by the end of this pod course, we hope that you'll be able to define the role of the SLP in supporting infants and explain how earlier involvement can influence developmental trajectories. Identify two early communication breaks in infants between 6 and 9 months and differentiate typical variation from patterns that warrant closer monitoring. Describe two strategies for partnering with families during the first year of life to share observational insights while supporting parents as primary observers and advocates. And then describe two ways a proactive family partnering approach in infancy can strengthen the SLP's role in early observation and contribute to advancing clinical practice. Here's our agenda for today. We're starting with introductions and backgrounds. Then we'll get into reframing the SLP's role in infancy, identifying early communication breaks, reframing observation as partnership, moving the field forward, and then finally we'll wrap up with references and closing remarks. Rachel, can you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been a speech pathologist since 2003. I remember when I was like, is it ever going to be 5 years? Is it ever going to be 10 years? And now I'm like, wow, where did time go? I have been a pediatric speech pathologist since 2009, and I'm currently founder and CEO of New Day Child Coaching, which supports infant toddlers and their families through a multidisciplinary PT, OT, and SLP model where we blend our expertise together. I am a specialist in early communication development, parent education. I use a whole child approach. So it's not just one area, we look at the whole child. And I'll just say it, I'm the visionary and thought leader behind and co-creator of the Why Do and How To series. Currently, we have published Why Do How To Crawling, which is again a multidisciplinary look at why infant crawling is so important. Quick aside, CDC took it off the milestone checklist, and we have something to say about that. So and then the other thing that we have got going is a line of children's books. Toto Teaches. My mom's illustrated them, and my team, PTOT, and myself have created them to be. I haven't seen anything like it. So it's focused on just children who have some special needs or delays, communication, sensory, motor, and we give bullets at the bottom of each illustrated page to help parents along in knowing what we're working on with each page. So making
That's
it
so
cute.
great. That's awesome. And I love that your mom got involved too with the
Yeah,
illustration piece of it.
family affair.
Do you remember, it's been a little bit since we've spoken. Can you help the listeners like share a little bit about what we talked about last time and what has transpired since we last spoke?
Gosh, that's trying to remember exactly. I think I was wanting to just share about the idea of multidisciplinary practice, not just PTOT SLPs working alongside each other, but actually cross training each other so that each discipline can look at and help support, hey, if the physical therapist is in, let's say, because the child has torticollis, but then they notice the child's not making any sounds, hey, SLP, can you help? Or do you have any suggestions or strategies that I can use or tell the parents, or so that we can all be inner supportive with one another, which will benefit the families most ultimately. But we're also benefiting ourselves because we're seeing how everything fits together. In the research for the crawling book, for example, one of the studies, now the research on crawling is limited, which is why the CDC most likely took it off the milestone checklist. However, some of the research shows that locomotion helps with communication, which makes sense, right? If a child's finally able to look at their world differently, they're motivated to want to interact with it more or to make joint attention and, hey, look at this, look what I'm seeing. Wow, I'm so excited. So that study was based on walking, but using evidence informed inference, we can guesstimate that if a study were to be done for locomotion for infant crawling, the similar outcome would happen. Now, the benefit too is that if that is to be the case, which again, we don't know yet, but if that were to be the case, that means that the locomotion and crawling, that happens before walking. So again, the opportunities for a child to develop more language-rich ability would happen earlier in infancy.
So fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when did you start New Day?
2023?
Okay. That might
Maybe,
have been around the time we spoke too.
okay, or maybe it was
Yeah.
2022. It's one of those things where the idea happened and how putting a business together and the all of the back end stuff goes together, right? So it took quite a while to navigate just forming the company. But the idea, yeah, it was probably, if we talked, then it was probably the year before that I came up with that.
Yeah, that it's like coming back now. That makes sense. Well, my name is Benita Litvak. I go by she, her. I have been an SLP since 2014. Not quite as many years, but I agree that it just starts to snowball once you get past like, I feel like the 5 year mark. I'm the host of the Speechy Side Up podcast, which is part of the Tassel Learning Network that provides CEUs. And I help develop the course content for Tassel. I am an owner of a private practice specializing in early intervention, ADHD, and autism. And I am currently a student at Northwestern, focusing on the science of teaching and learning. I will share my disclosures really quick and then I'll have you share yours, Rachel. I have ownership interest in Speechy Setup LLC and Tassel Learning LLC. How about you?
So I have owner interest in New Day Child Coaching and Communication Connection Speech Services, which is just my single entity of being a speech pathologist. I'm an ASHA member, and I also have a financial interest in the Why Do How To series, as well as the Toto Teaches series.
Amazing. Okay, let's dive right in. So, what does SLP involvement look like during infancy, and how can earlier support change a child's developmental trajectory? And can we just define that infancy period that you're referring to as well?
Sure. So infancy is 0 to 12 months. When we're looking at SLPs, so it's so interesting too. I've met SLPs that work with dysphagia or feeding, and I've met SLPs that don't. And so for the SLP that just focuses on communication, you're typically not going to be getting a referral for services until the child's 18 months,
Mhm.
usually, which does give a lot of time for the child to catch up naturally. And most kids do, right? I mean, that's just why we're given that much time. The issue is, okay, here's a quiz for you. So I'm going to put you on the spot and see how,
Okay.
but don't feel pressured if you get it, whatever. Okay, so the Harvard Center on the Developing Child has a statistic that more than 1 million new neurological connections or synapses are formed in the first years of life in, I'm going to give you a quantity of time. Do those 1 million new connections happen in 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, or 1 week?
I'm going to say 1 second.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's incredible. They updated, it used to be, I think, 700, and then they were like, they've updated the science since. But
Wow.
that is just showing how critical it is for the SLPs to be able to inform the families and other providers of these critical early things that we need to be monitoring, because if we can catch them earlier and support them earlier, then the brain has the opportunity to learn them earlier, right?
Mhm.
I mean, imagine what would it look like if we could offer parents support that much earlier in infancy when we typically get
Wow.
involved already mid-toddlerhood, right?
Yeah,
And then understanding that forming anything, whatever anything, is easier to form or shape than reshape.
that makes sense.
So if a child is having an issue and they develop compensatory strategies, or the parents develop compensatory strategies to handle that, how much harder it is to back away and reform that. One auditory visual, if you will, that I like to give is pretend you have a broken hand and you joined a knitting group and you learn how to knit with this broken hand in a cast, right? And you figure it out. And then the cast goes away. But you've been knitting so voraciously that you've got to either relearn how to use this hand now that's mobile, or you keep limping along with the way you learned because now it's easy for you. You're fluid with it. It's a fluid movement. Now, is it as efficient as if you had, your limber hand going? Probably not, but you still, it's easier to keep going with what you've already learned than it is to really focus on relearning the habit. So
It's a great visual. Thank you for that.
you're welcome. And then, what I really want my story is, well, a couple things that I've been noticing, right? So I have been practicing for a while. One of the things is the modern culture, we're growing more distant from what our ancestors did, from what our grandmothers did, our great grandparents, meaning that the time spent with the children is becoming more fragmented. It's more distracted. We have phones, we have text messages dinging here, and video games, and all these other distractions that our grandparents, great grandparents did not have. And in those times, parents would sing songs, for example, songs with finger play, Itsy Bitsy Spider, whatever it is. Today, when I'm asking parents, oh, do you sing songs? Oh yeah, we put on YouTube and my child loves it.
Mhm.
But there's not that reciprocity. There's not that back and forth communication. There's not that bonding that happens with that. Peekaboo is a similar thing. It's not as prevalent. That used to be just a very common thing that families did. It's not. It's like falling off the common usage. And those things, it's my curiosity, those breaks in bonds or breaks in that communicational reciprocity with the song singing, for example, is that contributing? Was that an environmental factor that's contributing to the delays that we see as well? Because if the TV's on all day, this is another example, if the TV is on all day and families will tell me, oh, but it's just in the background. I'm like, okay, do you notice that your voice raises then to talk above the TV? Or do you notice that you're more quiet throughout the day because the TV's on? And again, so as we know, if you're not talking as much to your child's not having that input. And again, so that could be an environmental factor. The other thing that I'm finding is that I personally am getting a lot of late referrals.
Mhm.
Now, when we look at in infancy, right, a child gets the well child every month up till age 12, and then 12 months, and then the child becomes a toddler, and then they get an 18-month checkup and then a 24-month checkup. If they make it to 18 months and they're showing some precursors of communication, or at least their doctor feels they are, they're not going to get a referral. But the parent's also not given any information, right? Like, it's just wait and see. Let's see what happens. And this is a case that just happened to me recently. Is the little guy is 24 months old. He hasn't advanced at all. And mom's so concerned, but she was told to wait and see. So now it's like an emergency. And I can't imagine how much stress that is on these poor families that want the help and then aren't getting the help. A couple other children I've gotten referrals for. I've gotten a few 30 or 33-month referrals for children that have communication delays, no functional communication. And then I find out in the interview that they're still drinking only liquid nutrition. And they were just weaned from a bottle a couple months before. And now they're on a bottle sippy because they basically didn't drink anything. They had no nutrition because that was what they wanted. And the doctor had said, well, it's a behavior. And just so by the time I'm getting this family now at 30, 33 months, they don't even want to talk about nutrition because it's been such a burden, hardship, stressful time for them that they're like, nope, let's just get some communication going. And it's heartbreaking. So the reason then, this is a more recent thing that has been churning in my mind, is that our typical and delayed framework that we use currently is outdated.
Mhm.
We're missing too many children, and too many parents are not being empowered to become advocates and to know what they're looking for, to know what they're looking at, and to know when to say, hey, look at the data here that I've collected. This is what's going on. This is what I'm seeing. Here's a video. Here's a few videos that, are indicating what I'm seeing. I need help, doctor. Help me listen. I'm a silly person. That's why I work for early intervention, I guess. But one of the things that I want parents to become are investigators, right? And so they're going to don their
Love that.
investigator's hat and their spyglass. And I want them to really start becoming active participants in what they're noticing for their kids so that access to help or understanding better how to support their kids happens more quickly. And so if you want to go to the next slide, this is the framework that I put together. So you'll see the three main columns, typical, delayed, and then the third column is I'm calling different, because children that are neurodivergent in whatever form aren't following the same trajectory that typical kids follow. And so when we only have that binary system of typical and delayed, we're really doing them a disservice and their families a disservice, because we're trying to force them into a delayed framework that still follows a typical pattern. And that's not celebrating their differences. That's not looking at them as like, hey, you've got a divergent brain and cool. What are your superpowers? What are the things that you're able to do that my brain isn't, for example? And I think that this, when you can spell it out in this way, so many more families and physicians too are going to have kind of the ability to exhale, to not try to force the child into this binary, typical or delayed framework.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, super helpful.
Yeah, and well, I can either explain it more now or I can wait till the next question. What would you like me to do?
Yeah, go ahead and share it now while we're
Okay.
on here. Yeah.
Okay. And so then there's three different levels that I'm helping parents to recognize that their child can be in and move from, right? So just because a child's in one level doesn't mean that they can't either advance or learn and move to the level one, or over time sink into needing more support for the level three. So what that looks like. So for example, level one typical, watch and support. That's a child that's developing typically, that we're celebrating. Yay, everything's going, you're on track, fantastic. The reason why I say watch and support, however, is because a child is typical until they're not, right? Yay, we're celebrating, we're supporting, and we're still doing everything that we're doing with them. We're not going to just change because they've met their milestones for that time period. When the typical child falls to level two, that's to indicate when a concern happens, such as parents separating or change in childcare provider, or something that happens that affects the child, that may affect their development, but it's more of a temporary thing. And so that level two is where parents can just learn. They can take coaching courses, we're offering that, or they can seek other ways to figure out how to help their child through that challenge. And then the typical level three, when to advocate for support. Now, typically these children, okay, let me say it first. This would be something catastrophic. So this is the child who's typically developing, but oh my gosh, needs a organ transplant. Suddenly something happens, they ingest something, something critical, major, catastrophic happens in that child's life. Typically, you're not going to have to advocate for support, right? Typically, like, the medical community is going to go ahead and plug you in. But should that not happen, because nothing's a guarantee, families could at least understand that these things will likely lead to the child needing more support and how to advocate for that. If we move over to the second column, so delayed, level one, watch and support. So this is a child who is slightly behind, maybe one milestone, right? But they're showing forward progress. So it's the child, for example, who's not yet having canonical babbling, but is starting to at least say a consonant vowel repetitively, but maybe not connected yet, right? So they're showing markers that they're moving towards achieving that milestone. The delayed learn how to support. Now, for this category, either the learn how to support or advocate for support, no shame to families. This is on them. Do they want to be their child's teacher, or are they wanting somebody else to really be there? Do they want outpatient services, for example, who will take the child and help the child catch up? Level two, though, is for the families that do want to be in active support, maybe, but they don't know what to do, right? So then they, again, would find how they would learn how to support their child within the home environment. Should that not advance them either to typical or to the higher level, then they would advocate for more help. And then the third level, the different column, level one is not a level that we would see in early children with early childhood, or I'm saying with very young children, because when a child's developing differently at that age, they're usually going to need support earlier. This category would be more for the child who is meeting their milestones, but maybe has stimming behaviors, hums, rocks, other things of that nature that really don't harm anything. The child's still thriving, still learning and progressing, and they just have some quirks. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, that child, though, let's say they like to yell and they also want to go to the movies. Well, that's something that you're going to have to learn how to support them through, because you can't yell in the movie theater. Either you can hold it together, or we need to take breaks, or you've got to figure out how to support them through that, because that's not going to be something that they're going to be able to do unless I remember this, Vanita, in Florida. Don't the movie theaters sometimes have days open for children with special needs?
I think so. It's not something that I've seen in a while, but I believe so.
Okay, this might be pre-pandemic, but I remember that. Like, I live in a very rural area, so that doesn't exist by me, but I remember for the larger cities. And anyway, so in that time, in that instance, right? Yeah, sure, go ahead. Yell
Mhm.
all you want. It's totally fine. And then the different level three would be, okay, my child is not advancing in a way that they can access their world, right? So whether it be communication or feeding or socially, right? That's when you might need to advocate for somebody who can really, in a skillful way, walk you through that.
Thank you. That's really helpful to walk through the visual and see like those examples and where it applies. Do you think you'll develop a screener for something like this? I feel like that would be so helpful.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. I mean, it's one of these things that's just been, it's a hard thing, like when you have a concept, and you probably know this, Vanita, when you have a concept, to bring it from like the ether, if you will, into reality, and to come
Mhm.
up with a terminology and to make it so that it makes sense is a hard thing to do, to go
Yeah.
from the thought to creation. But no, that's an interesting idea to make a screener for it. I like that. Okay.
Yeah. And then you could even eventually get it norm referenced at some point, but I know you've got a lot on your plate too. But I think that would be so helpful for something like this. Did your, I guess your team and your brain just like explode when the new CDC guidelines came out?
I mean, I'm just shaking my head. What can, I mean, all this kind of, this Pathwise watch and support is a reaction, if you will, or
Mhm.
an answer to all of this stuff happening. Because parents, if they can learn to become their own advocates, to become their own knowledge base and know how to advocate in an effective way, right? Because let's face it, sometimes you go to your care team and they just blow you off because you don't know how to express it in a way that is quantifiable, or you have the data. That's one of the things that I want to teach. But if we can have the parents, or encourage the parents to become their own child's expert, that's the answer. right?
Mhm.
Let's take it out of the government. Let's take it out of all these other people's hands and let's bring it back to the parents because the parents know their child best too. That's the other piece of it, right?
Yep.
The provider sees them for 15 minutes, sometimes, which is the case out here, because again, I'm in a rural area. You have your well child checks, but you keep seeing a different provider. So there's no continuity of care. That provider's not seeing the child how they were last month or how they're going to be next month. And so there's so many opportunities for that child's differences or needs to get missed. And so if the families, though, can understand not just the checklist of the milestone, but what does it look like as it's progressing? What does it look like to know that the child's making forward progress? Right. So, for example, in Amber, the physical therapist, right, when a child's on hands and knees and they start rocking back and forth, and then they might roll over, they're almost there. Like that child is just getting ready to start crawling. But if a family doesn't know that's the case, they might be concerned. So it can create a lot of false positives as well if the parents don't know things, right? Families are like, because Tommy down the street is walking, talking, tap dancing, and putting on a show at 2 years old, and their child's not. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they're comparing to another child, and but then if you, it's just a big, it's a big can of worms, I think.
It is. But I think like having your audience be parents is a really great idea. I could see this Pathwise being like an online platform with the screener that tracks the progress so that various providers could stay on top of where that child has been and where they're at now. I think the screener would help explain those levels and where a child fits in as well. But yeah, I think using this, I don't know how prominent you are on social media. I feel like this is a coaching call, but I really love your idea. But I feel like if you were like really active on social media, this could really speak to parents and break it down for them on like where they can get involved if they're noticing these things.
Well, and this I think is also great for SLPs, right? So that SLPs can also, we work with parents once or twice a week for a very limited amount of time. We are experts, but if we keep that hat and that baton, if you will, to ourselves, we're really impeding progress for the babies, especially
Mhm.
knowing that Harvard statistic, right? We've got to think beyond. And the thing about it is, Vanita, I mean, you've been working now for a number of years. We are never going to put ourselves out of business, like ever. So holding on to, oh, I've got to be the expert about things, we're missing, kids are getting missed, and we just, the lines are so long as it is, right? We just can't help everybody unless we change the framework.
Yeah, it's got to be put in the hands of parents. It just made me think of this like reading influencer. He was also an educator. He does the Toddlers Can Read program. And I really love what he's doing because he's putting like the responsibility of teaching reading into the hands of parents. And he says it point blank, you cannot rely on the schools to teach your kids to read. When only 30% of kids are reading, I think it's in third grade, on grade level, they're missing the mark and like you're going to be able to help your child catch up. So I feel like if we could take that and apply it to these other areas as well, and just like informing parents rather than having them so reliant on the professionals, helping them to advocate for themselves, we could see so much more progress.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then in that case too, with the man who's teaching, who's helping with the reading, it's the screens and the distractions are really what's, I think, really impacting the kids, right? Because that's another piece. Our grands and ancients read to their children, sat down and had book time, and it was a fun time. It wasn't, I mean, we don't want this to be a 3 hour conversation,
Yeah.
so
Or like the shaming, because I know people do have to implement those tools for various reasons. Like I do that as well, but we have to look at what those are actually doing too, and we can't really deny it.
And there's also quality, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the other piece of it. So I think when we say the word screen time, it should be another 3 by 3 type of diagram so
Yeah.
that you can really understand all the different levels of what screen time really means. Is it passive? Is it active? Are you using it as a coach? Are you using it because you need a shower? I mean, yeah, I don't, when I say the distractions, they are there though, right? If you have your phone on to notify you of every single app you have and you're trying to spend time with your child one on one, like mute that stuff, right? Because it all, anyway. But yes,
Yeah.
no, I shaming is never a part of anything I want to do at all. Everybody is free to make whatever, just that's the other piece. You are free to make your decisions. I just want to inspire you or even just to provide you information so that you can make an informed decision.
I
If
love
you
that.
choose to make whatever decision you want after I tell you that here's the research, cool, that's your choice.
Mhm. Yeah, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And
$100.
I think sometimes we can get defensive when we know that you're speaking the truth. Like, for instance, when my daughter was young, she was sucking her thumb, and I had seen a post and I was so offended by it, how it like was saying that it's not normal and all of these things. And then I looked into it a little bit more, and not that it wasn't normal, but and I think that they could have phrased it a little bit better, but it was an issue, and it could have been an even bigger issue had we let it go on longer than it did. Thankfully, she stopped at around 3.5 years, but it was not easy. Let me tell you, it was like potty training all over again.
Yeah.
But and then the teeth went right back to normal, and I'm so glad we did it when we did because you know what the long-term effects of prolonged thumb sucking is. So that was a sidebar, but it just to share that sometimes it's challenging to hear things when you know that it's like the truth, and it's so much harder to stop that and do the right thing, but you have to make that informed decision yourself, basically.
Well, and imagine if so, pacifiers, right? It's like wean them by 1 year old, right? Otherwise, you might have a harder time weaning them as they get older because it's the habit, right?
Hmm.
So imagine though, Vanita, if you saw that thumb sucking post when she was 11 months old.
Right.
That you might not have had that whole potty training type struggle.
Oh, we did. This was the fourth time that we had to finish. Actually, I learned from a really informative program that age 4 is the ideal age for thumb sucking to stop.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
from some of the research articles that they shared. So thumb sucking, because it requires you can't pull the thumb out of the child's mouth, and
Right.
all of the things you can do to block it, the nail polish, the arm guard, all of those things, they'll just find another finger is what I found out. So we went from a thumb to another digit. But at age 4, like around how it goes with potty training, the understanding of the why and then the positive rewards makes it successful. And
You know,
we've finally nixed it.
I'm glad. And I'm curious too, right? So I don't know, this isn't probably another aside, but I'm wondering if thumb sucking is kind of like that nervous system regulation, right? Because it's sucking like the pacifier.
Yeah.
And so if we were able to intervene in that way, right? Like figuring out what are her causes of stress or how to help her. Anyway,
Yeah,
another
no, I
whole
read a
thing.
whole article about that as well.
Yeah.
Believe me, I did so much research and we
But
tried everything, but this actually worked.
great, 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 great. But
Yeah,
that's just another idea of how to look at,
the
and
whole
it sounds
picture.
exactly.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing too. It's unfortunate because I do think sometimes parents get information, but it might not be the right time for that information. And so it's a really tricky balance with like appropriate development. And then when it's like you said, if we go back to this, when it starts to become delayed. And I feel like parents can have this information because I'm going through this now, but there are certain foundational concepts that parents may not get access to because if they're getting this information piecemeal, whether it's through a social media post or through coaching, you don't have the knowledge that an expert who has gone and got their master's degree does. So collaborating with those professionals is also really important. Like you can't do it completely by yourself. I'm experiencing that with the reading. So I did the Toddlers Can Read program, but then you get to a point where like the program ends and you can't help anymore. And I don't have that knowledge of like how to continue to support, even though it is within an SLP's scope of practice, it is not my specialty. But even with like math, for instance, I get information on how to teach math, but I don't know which concept to teach first before, you do the next one. And so I have to like work with someone who is an expert in math in order to support my own child. So that's another side note, but it's just important, like for parents to collaborate with those professionals too.
And that is what level 2 is meant to be. So it
Okay.
says learn how to support. That's who you're learning from,
Hmm.
is the professional, the expert in whatever the need is. So if it's reading, the reading professional. If it's math, the math professional. If it's something physical, the PT. If it's communication, or it would be us. That's the tier. So the deal is, though, is that learn how to support, they're learning from us as a coaching model, right? We're sharing with them our information, but not prescriptive. So it's not like, hey, you, here's exactly what's happening. Here's what I would suggest you do. It's more of a broad, like, oh, at this stage, here are some things that you might want to try. And then the parent can learn how to do those things. Or even what I'm envisioning with what I want to do is give like a brief tutorial on here's how you can support doing this or this. And then parents can learn from that and then apply that on their own. But when they get to level 3, that's when they're going to need directive, prescriptive. Here's the issue. Okay, let's address this specifically. So this is prescriptive. This is one-on-one. This is therapy, not just level 2, which would be coaching.
Got it. Okay. Very cool. So, how do you distinguish between the typical variation from early communication breaks in the 6 to 9 months range, and how does your framework guide that reasoning?
Yeah. So, the research talks about, and it's just so interesting because, again, we don't get involved early enough in communication for infants, but it's there. The research talks about it. So by 6 months old, the canonical babbling, the mama, dad, dada, baba, 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 is happening. And then by about 9 months, children start to mix syllables. So that's the ba, da, ma type
Mhm.
of emerges. Interestingly, the canonical babbling emerges about 5 months before first words. So it's a really important piece that if a PT is in there, for example, working on sitting, hey, PT, are they quiet or are they making sounds? And maybe while the PT is working on sitting, or the parents following the PT prescriptive advice, and then the PT can also say, while they're working on that, start to model some sounds or start to have some vocal play with them and see if anything can build from that. So a pattern of concern, however, would be no canonical babbling by 9 months. Very limited consonant variety, so only 2 to 3 different consonants would be a concern. No increase in complexity. So how many little babies have you heard that are just vowel? They're just vocalizing with vowels. And not using vocalization to get attention either. Why it matters is that research shows that delays in canonical babbling can predict later language delays, autism, and other developmental delays. So another piece of, and also high risk infants show significantly lower babbling ratios at 9 months. So this right here is so important for us to be telling everybody, right? This should be on the Better Speech and Hearing month of May. Every day should be, hey, infants, this is a PSA. This is what should be happening. And if it's not, again, here's what you can do to support it. And if that's not working, let's get help now rather than waiting. And I think that this is a piece that, again, the care team, I don't mean to disparage care teams, and I'm not disparaging them. I think that they do phenomenal work. I think that they have way too much to do, especially with all the changes that are happening to them. I mean, they're arguing misinformation it feels like just my heart just hurts for them, for everything that they're now having to struggle through that has been commonplace for so many years. But so I'm not wanting to put this on their lap, but again, if parents could just be educated or informed, and the same thing with our PT and OT allies, they're usually the ones that get involved with kids that have delays, motor delays. Have them do some minor screenings and give them some basic tools, right? So that parents can start to see if a little coaching can help or if we need to be involved earlier. The second communication break is that joint attention and gaze following. So this is social cognitive, right? So by 6 months, research shows that 44% of infants produce joint attention vids. And joint attention, right? You look at somebody, you look at an object, you look back at the person, like, hey, are you seeing what I'm seeing? By 7 months, 72% of infants have made joint attention vids, and by 9 months, nearly all infants, so 92%, demonstrate joint attention. And they actually even start to follow your pointing as well, and then they'll start to point. So there is a variation, and cultural differences absolutely influence interaction styles, so that's a caveat. But the patterns of concern, again, are if a child or an infant's not following the caregiver's point or gaze by 9 to 10 months, if they're not responding to their name, if they're lacking social referencing, so they're not checking in on their parent or caregiver's face for their emotional state. The thing about it, I think, is that these things are subtle for probably most people. They're not picking up on those cues unless they have other children, maybe, or they're really in tune with their infant. Why it matters, though, is joint attention at 6 months predicts receptive vocabulary at 12 months.
Mm.
And gaze following at 10 to 12 months predicts language at 14 to 18 months. And absence of coordinated attention is a marker for autism and developmental concerns. So again, this is another one that we should be screaming about. I know, are you familiar with the work of Amy Weatherby, Dr. Amy Weatherby at FSU?
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, she's so brilliant, and the framework that she has with Baby Navigator and Autism Navigator, where she talks about gestures, that was a study done in 2006, talking about how gestures are an early form of absence of gestures are an early marker of autism. But anyway, so is joint attention. And then the third one that I want to chat about is social engagement through interactive games. So what's that looking like? Peekaboo is the easiest one to think about, right? So babies from 3 to 6 months start to actively seek attention. So they might watch or smile or start cooing, like they enjoy it. 4 to 6 months, they'll engage in peekaboo with smiling. They might anticipate when hands are gonna come down. 6 to 9 months, they become active participants and they attempt to cover or uncover their own faces. And then by 9 months, they might initiate the game, say boo, and demonstrate that really fun turn-taking aspect. Again, culturally, that can vary. Specific games vary across cultures. Patterns of concern is if the infant's not enjoying this interaction by 9 months or doesn't take turns and back and forth exchanges. It's really interesting, actually. There's been a few things on Peekaboo that have piqued my interest. One was somebody was explaining how Peekaboo is an early example of object permanence.
Mhm. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And I was like, okay, interesting. And then another study, this actually, I haven't been able to read the research, I just saw the link for it. So in 2025, they were studying how people responded to, or people that enjoyed horror or being scared as like an enjoyable thing, how they actually have better resiliency.
Mm.
And they looked at even Peekaboo, for example, and how that reveal can be scary, right? I mean, you're saying boo, right?
Mhm.
But what it does is when the brain can anticipate, so the amygdala gets turned on, the adrenaline gets pushed out, but the frontal cortex is still engaged. So I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Siegel and his work, but he talks about flipping the lid when the amygdala is on and you get stressed out. But when your lid's able to be flipped back and your prefrontal cortex is engaged and you have that balance of the amygdala heightened, but then the prefrontal cortex being able to subdue it, it's this really incredible way of, again, I need to read the research, but it just came out, or I just was made aware of it, that resiliency boost. So it's neat to think that we're helping our children become more resilient at this
Yeah,
young age by just engaging in Peekaboo.
that's great. Do you know, you said that it's canonical babbling. It takes about 5 months before the first words. Do you know how long it takes between like the gestures to first words or canonical babbling?
I don't know.
Yeah, me neither. I'm thinking of a friend of mine. And
Are they
then
using gestures?
they are using all the gestures, but not the canonical babbling yet. And they're approaching a year, but also like, you know, I'm here if they want the support. I don't feel like it's my job to put
Yep,
it out there.
yep,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah. With like the CDC removing the crawling, do you see that like some kids skip the canonical babbling as well?
I mean, that's the thing is that I'm not getting the referrals early enough. So
Hmm.
by the time I'm getting the child at 18 months old, I'm planning to implement these questions in part of my report so that I'm actually asking the family. So I'm not just relying on the testing, which I don't do anyway. I have a variety of questions that I ask just because I like to get under and really investigate that things that the a standardized test just doesn't ask, right?
Hmm.
How many children, for example, I get a lot that are referred for a speech delay and they're totally dysregulated. And we need to address their regulation before they're ever going to be able to functionally communicate in a meaningful way over time. No, I don't. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up. I wonder if Amy Weatherby's like resources share that information. But it's the 10 gestures, right? By 10 months or something like that.
Oh, she's got 16 by 16.
16 by 16. Thank you.
So
I don't know why I
16
keep saying
gestures by
10.
16 months. And then I think, what's the other one? So then she starts though with actions, right? So her pyramid is actions and then gestures and
Okay.
which though too, right? That's again where we should be getting our PT and OT friends to engage in because actions go so beautifully with what they're working on, right?
Yeah, makes sense. How do you share early observations with families in ways that build understanding and empower parents as primary observers and advocates?
So this one, this is actually really, I'm trying to think of how to explain it without, I'll just say it, old information, meaning that it's stuff that's been studied for so long. And I think that those of us in early intervention hopefully do it very well. But if you're newer to early intervention or actually even just newer to kind of family centered therapy, that you might not be so hip to it. But it's embedded coaching in daily routines. And what that means is that you're working with the family during their actual routines. So the family's not having to stop what they're doing and get on the floor and play with whatever toys or sing whatever songs at the specified time. Instead, you ask them, okay, let's look at what's a challenging time. Is feeding a challenging time? Is diapering a challenging time? Bath time or play? Where is your challenge? And then you embed a plan together, right? Which routine would you like to feel more connected, or what would be the outcome of what that, for example, let's say it's diapering, and the child every time you even go to get the diaper, the child see ya and it has a meltdown because they just don't like it. Well, let's talk about that. So you plan which activity you're going to work on, and then you observe what's happening, and then the action would be that a parent tries one small strategy in the routine that you're doing, and then you reflect and ask how it worked. Because the piece of it is you want to meet parents where they're at and you want to help them in their pain points. Like, where are the pieces of the day that are hurting, that are throwing them off track? And when you do that and you can help them work through that, then you're opening up space for them to do other things, right? But if diapering, for example, is a big deal, like I said, which it is with so many families, and they're dreading that, they're not going to have the space possibly to work on the objectives that you're wanting to help move forward with.
Mhm.
And then one of the other pieces of language or coaching and language for coaching is you really want to focus on the positives, right? So whatever the good things that you're seeing that they're doing, even if it's a bunch of stuff that you're like having to really use a telescope to find that and
Mhm.
comment on it. Everybody likes hearing what they're doing well, right? And so once people can get that little nugget of feeling good, and you're not going to, like, you're being sincere. I don't mean to make something up. But once you can reflect on something that they're doing well, guess what? They're going to want to keep doing whatever it is they're doing well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
And the other thing, so this comes from, are you familiar with promoting first relationships?
Is that out of the state of Florida? Is that a program?
It's
I-
actually out of Washington.
Oh, Washington. Okay.
But
I
go
I
ahead.
don't know where I've seen it before, but I've seen it.
There may be other programs that are similar. I believe that this data came from the 70s, which is why I was like, how do I explain this without just calling me old? But it's basically positive reflections. And so the second strategy then is video aided reflection, right? And so that's going to be the parent gets to choose, pick a routine. They're going to record it for 2 minutes. And then you're going to watch it together and you're going to pause at key moments and ask them discovery questions. So, what surprised you when you watched this? Or tell me what you were thinking right here. Or did you see how she responded when you did whatever? So, you're really helping the parents go from actors to observation, right? Which is that whole inspector concept that I really want to empower parents to be. And then identify one tiny next step. So, based on what they noticed, not what you're prescribing. And that's how we can get families to trust us and to really feel excited that they're a part of their own child's development. And so, one thing that's really fun though, too, is that I have had parents who implement the strategies and then say to me, well, they just caught up. But I'm like, how many months had they gone without doing X, Y, or Z? And then you implemented the strategies and now they just caught up? Mom, you're not taking ownership. You just changed their world. But it happens so subtly, I think, that it's just day to day. They don't necessarily track it. Yeah. So that's, I think, how we as SLPs and professionals can really start to look at our relationships with families as partnerships rather than as the provider that knows everything.
Mm. These are great strategies. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
So, if more SLPs partner proactively with families in the first year of life, how could that shift the field and what mindset change would make the biggest impact?
So, like we've been talking about, right? The current medical framework is binary. It is break fix, it is pass fail, it is typical or delayed. And it's going to be a challenge to change that in that insurance only pays for when something's broken, right? Or when something is delayed or when there's a problem. Insurance doesn't pay for preventative care. I mean, only you get a preventative woman visit, right? I mean, it's very limited, but you're not getting preventative care, for example, child development. It's all reactive. And if we can shift that, something else that came to my mind, it's like even in early intervention, you have to fail in order to get into the program. And so do we really want to make children have to fail before we can help them succeed?
Right.
Imagine just the stress of that whole framework, right? That puts on families. And it doesn't have to be that way. The other thing I think that's interesting is so this new framework that I'm proposing, this Pathwise shift. So we have typical, delayed, and different. I like to look at it as the analogy is cars. So you have a mechanic, you know that you need to take your car to the mechanic to get the oil changed, right? Typical car, go in, get it changed, or they pick the dipstick, it's clear, put it back, You go take a car that might have a little, maybe the light comes on or a little wobble or whatever it is, and you take it, but let's say it's related to the engine oil. I take the dipstick. Oh, it's dirty. Okay, well, you know what to do. You go under the car, you remove the whole thing. But then another car comes, and this is a different car, and you take it to the mechanic, and they open up the hood, but there is no dipstick because it's an electric car. Totally different, right? That's where we have to shift. We have to shift from a binary to a dynamic framework. I think that partnering with parents, with prevention, partnering with our other allies, the PTs and OTs, really, because we are the team, we are the providers that are communication experts and social communication experts. So we are just as important as PT and OT, but we don't get viewed that way just because of how this binary system is working, right? Like these electric cars, if you will, aren't getting the services that they need because nobody's recognizing it. That's our strength, is to scream that from the top of the mountains. I also think that another way and another mind shift is that families can become co-researchers, not just the service recipients, but they can collect tons of incredible data for us, which, when I'm sure somewhere we can use that as some sort of study that's outside of the clinical typical way that things are studied and looked at. I understand the variation, right, of having a non-researcher give you data, but maybe there can be some way to have it a little bit more well packaged. And even just observations can be really helpful. But I really feel that the paradigm needs to shift. And when we learn with families instead of just what we're teaching to families, I think is a really big gap and what a really big opportunity for us in the field.
Yeah, these are all excellent points and would be amazing to see that shift. Hopefully, one day that'll happen. But I think the work that you're doing is really going to help get us there. So I am so grateful that you came on today and you shared about Pathwise and the watch and support framework. I think it's so important. So can you talk a little bit about some of these resources that you've shared?
Sure. So the promoting first relationships is the one that we were just chatting about, with looking at the coaching model a little bit more and really helping parents be observers and parents make their own, clue in on their own antecedents, if you will, or what might be happening with their child. And really that helps also build that parent-child bond. I think that's the other thing. I didn't mention it, but the opportunity to repair bonds that might be broken when a child isn't developing typically or has delayed milestones because of the stress, right? So the parent's stressed, the child's not talking. Now the parent's asking the child tons of questions. They're giving them flashcards. They're doing all these things, and nobody's having fun. That relationship is just out the window because the parent is so concerned and they don't know how to help their child be supported. So that promoting first relationships looks at the bond first and then builds from that. Baby Navigator, Autism Navigator, like we just were chatting about. I mean, if you don't know those websites, get to know them. They're really pretty amazing. And again, that's putting the parent in the driver's seat so that parents can make their own ahas, have their own aha moment rather than somebody saying to them, this is what I'm seeing. The first 1,000 days, I don't know if you're familiar with that information, but it's what the evidence from Harvard talked about, right? That the brain is developing so fast that everything that we can do, nutrition and all of it, right, during this time is critical. Absolutely critical, and sets the foundation for the rest of the child's and adults and persons, I guess, life. And again, things can change, but it's a lot harder to reshape than shape. Feeding Matters, I just put that in there because that's another very parent-friendly resource that a lot of providers can go to for children with pediatric feeding disorder. Or so, and I know we didn't talk about feeding, but it's just a really nice resource. And then, of course, my Why Do How To Crawling and the Toto Teaches. I figured they're on Amazon. The crawling workbook, I have a professional edition that has resources. The parent edition is more geared for the family. The intro is a little more gentle, not gentle, but more parent friendly. And there are no resources. And then the hardcover of that is meant to be a keepsake. So you can like actually write down fun stories about what your child was doing, and then if the CDC continues to keep crawling off the milestone checklist, then maybe when your child has a child, you can pass that on to them.
Yeah.
And then the Toto Teaches, you can check those out too.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those.
You're welcome.
We are wrapping up today, but I will briefly share. You have a whole slide of references that people can access. We also like to include research studies and articles on those research studies and share the quality of those studies. So you do have a meta-analysis here, which is a very high quality study, and that's on determining the associations between intervention amount for young autistic children. So that one we would highly recommend checking out. And these are worth checking out as well, just because they're considered like lower quality. They're more survey based. So it might be because it would be unethical to do an intervention that would prevent children from getting access to services. These are also worth taking a look at, but we like to be transparent about the type of research that we are sharing. Here are all the other references that Rachel has shared with us, and we'll include those as well for you to access. And Rachel, where can everybody find and connect with you?
Yeah, so we are on all the socials. We have a YouTube channel. Our website is at www.newdaychildcoaching, and then all of our handles are the same at New Day Child Coaching. So Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, Substack. Some of these things, though, I'm not necessarily posting so often, but I'm hoping to remedy that soon.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming back on, Rachel. This was such an informative talk, and as I am expecting, I'm sure I'll be coming back to reference a lot of this information too.
Sweet. My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you for having me again, Benita.